As we all live longer, age really is just a number. But retirement is so much more than one. Your Metro Detroit Edward Jones financial advisors want to know what you want out of your retirement, so we can help get you there. Call us toll-free at 866-975-8655. Again, that's 866-975-8655 to schedule an appointment. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit. It is Thursday, December 14th, 2023, coming to you from the Daily Detroit studio at TechTown. I am Jer Stace, and across the table from me is our old friend,
Norris Howard. I'm back.
Well, you know what? We missed you. Where were you?
I was out in San Francisco.
The San Francisco treat.
Yeah. Was it rice-a-roni?
Yeah, rice-a-roni.
Yeah.
That's it. Just eat a bowl of rice-a-roni on the trolley.
Yeah, man. San Francisco was cool. It was nowhere near the hellscape that is it's purported to be. There's a lot of AI people out there though, which was a bit off-putting to me.
So, business take you out there?
Yeah. Was out there for business, myself and my partner, and we just had a good old time. And she was super excited to go out there. It was her second time out there. It was my first time out there. So I've been in California a bajillion times, never been to San Francisco. I guess I forget how far away it is from LA and the rest of Southern California. So it was an interesting experience. It's an interesting town. But yeah, it was pretty cool.
Top takeaway?
Top takeaway.
Obviously, as a tourist, all that other stuff.
Yeah. But for me, what I like to do is I go where the real people at. You know, I like to walk around the neighborhoods, go to where, off the beaten path, so to speak. And once you got into the neighborhoods, San Francisco's great. It's a fantastic town to live in. Tons of character. Shockingly, there were places you could rent that were not as expensive as some of the places here.
Really?
Yes, that was shocking to me. But again, it's just, it's density, it's more people. And so you got to have people of all economic levels to make your society function. And there were some actual affordable, not crappy places to live in San Francisco. I will say, man, once you got into the city center and around like that Tenderloin area, it was pretty depressing, I will say. So, not as bad as people made it out to say, but also the bad that is there is pretty bad.
So in some ways it makes me think of here in a number of cities I've been to where you've got great areas and then you've got areas that are not so great. And depending on your narrative and what you want to push, you could push whatever you want to push.
Yeah, but the thing is like that area Tenderloin is not a big neighborhood. So,
okay, so give me an idea.
I would say roughly about the size of, I don't know, man, like half of Midtown.
Really?
Yeah, it's not that big, man. It's like a few blocks. Like, it's really not that big. Now, don't get me wrong, like, it permeates a little bit, especially to the north and to the east a little, but it ain't all that big. San Francisco itself ain't all that big. I think you could fit all of San Francisco in like the west side.
Oh, I think even less than that. So I just looked it up. 0.35 square miles.
Yeah.
So it's 25,000 people in it. Now imagine if there was 25,000 people living anywhere in Metro Detroit. That isn't a thing here. But 0.35 square miles is less than half. Like so downtown Detroit, like the central business district, is 1 square mile. To give you an idea, it's just 1/3 of downtown Detroit, of the central part.
It's a dense 1/3, square mile of destitution. And that is very shocking to see, but literally you drive 3 blocks and you're out of it. It's like, it's really,
so
really
it's hyper-concentrated.
Hyper-concentrated. Obviously, I compared a lot to coming home and seeing the things that are going on here. And it just reminds me of just how big the city is and how difficult it is to allocate services in a city this big with the size of the population that we have. It's just tough, man. I do not envy our legislature because it's tough, man.
Because you work that math, and I know that there are other districts that are also densely populated in San Francisco, but you work that math. That would be 76,000 people living in just the square mile that runs from the riverfront to 75 to the lodge to 375. Not even the rest of greater downtown, just that little bit. And how different things would be if you had that kind of density.
Yeah, it would be really different. It would be, in my opinion, really magnificent. And you know, there's still this unwillingness to build vertically in the city for some reason. Don't get me wrong, we have a lot of land. I get it. If you're not going to build elsewhere in the city and use some of that vacant land, at least build vertically in the places that are more densely populated. But I'm not really seeing either. I'm still seeing those weird, what do you call them?
5/1s?
The 5/1s and stuff, which I get because you don't have to use concrete. You could build it all with a wood frame.
Yeah, there's
so
a concrete first floor and then wood frame all the way up.
Yeah, so it's cheaper. I get it. But at the same time, you know, if you want this place to be dense and you want the energy and the movement and you want a reasoning for people to put money behind some public transit, you don't have to, you know, put your money where your mouth is and build vertically.
Let's start with a statewide poll where the Detroit Regional Chamber, March was the last one, so I think it's twice a year. Yeah, and there's very limited polling about things around here. So they work with a reputable group called the Glengariff Group. This is of 600 registered Michigan voters, which I know people are going to be like, well, why didn't you poll 10,000 people? I don't know if people realize to get real polling data that isn't just like a Yahoo survey, how hard it is to get actual polling data out there.
Again, going back, you don't have density. You can't canvass one building and get 500, you know, respondents.
And you got to weight it and all those other things.
Yeah,
like there's an actual math and science to all of this that I think a lot of the public may not understand.
Yeah, that was actually my minor in college, sociology. So I understand how this all works. This is not as easy as you think it is.
What's the biggest challenge for me? I've been told that the switch to cell phones makes it a lot harder.
Yep.
And then just people are more mobile than they used to be.
People are more mobile / transient. People move more. Demographics actually shift a lot faster than they used to back in the day. And also flightiness. People get emails and paper mail and, you know, all sorts of phone calls, and people just don't respond because people don't trust these things.
Okay. Well, there were some key findings, 4 of them. We'll talk about some more than others. The first one was that the recent strikes with the UAW, the public did not look at them as positively as I think people first thought. Another one is that 1 in 5 Michigan voters think that the state is economically competitive. So only 20% think that we are being competitive. And more than a third consider that our public education system is a drawback.
So I'm a pause here and I'm going to just, you know, reiterate that I told y'all so. And I keep banging this drum on Detroit Public School District in particular. And, you know, you go to any major city and listen, we know public schools will always sort of lag behind private schools and you know, little, what I like to call the baby Ivies, you know, where we're, you know, the Cranbrooks of the world and stuff like that. But you cannot entice people to come to your city and stay in your city if your public school system is insufficient.
The hard part about that, though, is that I've looked at a number of studies that show that school attainment tracks exactly with household income. And it's really hard to break that cycle. And the ways you do it are when local schools, individual schools, have a higher household income that have more resources. So at the end of the day, to me, the root is poverty. But then how do you increase that household income without doing a lot of the other things that people don't like either? This is a hard question with unhappy answers, to be honest.
It is unhappy answers. And unless you want, you know, the school district by itself to somehow go out and attain funding from alternate sources, or you got to increase the tax base. We haven't necessarily seen either happening right now.
But then there's also that important part of the family. If you make $100,000, you've got way more resources compared to somebody who's making, I don't know, 30 or 38 or whatever the current Detroit median is. A lot of suburbs are in these same boats where if you don't have the money, you don't have the ability to pay for extra programs. You don't have the ability and the freedom, because when you make more money, often, weirdly, your job gives you more freedom than less.
Oh, yeah. And let's be honest. If you're making $150,000, whether it be individual or household income, you probably don't live in the city. You live elsewhere.
Or so you do, and you have access to other things.
To other things, i.e. private school. So I think, you know, when we're talking about economic competitiveness. I think this is an issue, as you said, tied to poverty. I think this is an issue that I haven't necessarily seen the same amount of energy behind as much as we're seeing, oh, we just need more people to live here. Oh, we just need more apartments. Oh, we just need more affordable housing. Yes, all those things are true. Two things can be true at the same time. But until we address the underlying issues of poverty and education, which also go alongside with safety, which is another big thing that I always bang the drum on.
I get the hate mail for that one.
Oh, safety? Which, by the way, if you look at every poll of actual Detroiters and people who've lived in this city for multiple years, safety is their number one issue.
There's a huge generational disconnect there, though. Like, if you look at what people will say online, or especially like your Gen Z versus your X or even some of your millennials at this point, there's a giant difference in view. It's hard to reconcile because I see those things online. I'm like, that is not what my block captain says.
Well, it's not even just a matter of what the block captain says, but let's just be honest. When you're young, no, you're not worried about safety as much. You know, you're going out, you're doing young people stuff. You live a more risky lifestyle. And I'm not necessarily saying that you shouldn't. Young people should do that because that's what youth is for. But at the same time, the older you get, the more you start recognizing what's happening in your surroundings, the more you start realizing the effect of your environment on the youth because you're not in it, you're an observer of it.
When your barbecue, your lawnmower, and all your front porch chairs are stolen, your opinions change.
Your opinions change. Or when your house is broken into for the 4th time, your opinions change.
And we both know people like that, and I've been that person.
Yeah, and so, you know, I was that person before I was 30. So, you know, I get it. It's not necessarily just a youth thing, but when you're living downtown and you're living in certain neighborhoods, yes, your view on safety and what constitutes safety is a little bit different than I think the rest of the city proper.
Well, and the region, because we have these same issues of race and everything else. I want to make sure that there's a pin in this. It's not just a Detroit thing, especially with the changing demographics. In some ways, some of the issues, and people may not like to hear this, are bigger or even harder to wrestle with in the suburbs. Yeah. Couple more things for this statewide survey. More than 2/3 of voters support what they call investing over cutting taxes, despite expressing dissatisfaction with the state's tax structure. So they don't like how things are being spent, but also 66% or something like that. It's crazy. Want to see more investing over tax cuts, which is a different view, and it feels like a coalition of your kind of mid-left and your center, where you're far right, and all these things have crosstabs, everything else. I'll link to it in the show notes. There are just huge gaps between your left, your right, strong Republican, strong Democrat. But when it comes to investing in infrastructure, that's actually like 2 out of 3.
Everybody agrees for the most part. There's a plurality on our infrastructure should be better. You know, people think the roads should be better. The conversation around mass transit is increasing. We're starting to hear this conversation a lot more in the discourse in Metro Detroit. I don't even want to just say just the city, but in Metro Detroit in general, especially since Dan Gilbert has come out and said he supports some sort of expansion of public transportation, or at least mass transit, because it will have to be some sort of public-private coalition this point. We're not going to go full public. But at the same time, you know, the dissatisfaction with the state's tax structure that's kind of oxymoronic at this point. Like,
there are things that conflict throughout all of this, right?
Yeah, and so that's the thing for me, is that, you know, you want these things, but you don't want to pay for them. And that just sounds like all of it is a very sort of American thing, right? Like, this is to me, America to a T, is I want all this stuff, but I don't want to pay for it. And I don't necessarily know how you fix that currently, because we all know right now we're not going to see a larger tax on, you know, corporations. We're not going to see an expansion of the gas tax. We're not going to see expansion of many of the things that we have in Michigan in order to increase revenue. So, yeah, if you want this stuff, get ready. Your taxes are going to go up.
The question is how, right? And how that's done. You know, there's so many different crosstabs and things to pull from. I do want to mention that there is a little bit of a difference in thoughts. Younger people find it that they're saying that it's a lot harder to find jobs, the 18 to 29 group. Older people are saying, no, everything's fine. And I think there is also a large group of Michiganders that show in the same way that we had that survey before at the at the Mackinac Policy Conference, your life experience is very different depending on what side of 8 Mile you're on.
1,000%.
And that is the 2 Metro Detroits. We always focus about 2 Detroits in Detroit, but I think even bigger.
It's really like 4.
Yeah.
It's really like 4 Detroits. It's like Detroit proper, and then there's Oakland County and the inner ring suburbs, and then there's Western Wayne County, and then there's Macomb County up there on the island by itself.
Which has its own concerns.
Absolutely. I think, to be perfectly honest, I think, racial tensions in Macomb County are very, very, very stark and very different than they are even down here in the city proper. But one of the things that I will say about that sort of generational divide that you've mentioned is that I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think there's a lot of older millennials that also, or older and mid-aged millennials like myself, that are very well aware of how difficult it is to find a gig. And I think there's a large cohort of people that we continue to sort of ignore when it comes to a lot of these job conversations. And that's like the some college people, the I went to school but didn't finish my degree people. Because for me, there's a lot of people who have skills that they've attained, that they've learned, but they don't necessarily have that piece of paper that say, I officially have the skills. And those people are going to have a harder time, and they're going to be lumped in with the people who have no post-secondary education. They're going to be lumped in to people who have maybe just associate's degrees, and it's going to be more difficult for them. And we don't really talk about that cohort of people anywhere in the conversation of jobs. And just to add on that before you jump in, Jer, I think also when it comes to Gen X and older, they have to recognize that the very nature of work in America has shifted so dramatically from when some of these folks first entered the workforce. It's shifted dramatically from when I first started working.
So from that March poll, there was this data point that I shared on Threads that 27% of Michigan voters think that a college degree is very important. It's already gotten a ton of responses. And it kind of shows that divide a little bit, where there were a lot of people who are saying, look, without my degree or for engineering or whatever, I wouldn't have the life I have. But a lot of people going, you know what, I went to college and the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, and they feel very dissatisfied. This could almost be a whole episode unto itself because this is a complicated topic. But I think there's a lot of nuance in there, and like, which school did you go to? What kind of degree are you trying to get? Are we being practical or are we being aspirational? Like, do we have other on-ramps? I think about, I moderated a panel for Mish Auto about a week ago, and I interviewed this wonderful person, Caroline, who has a different path to get into coding. It was through Macomb Community College. It was a coding internship or some kind of program.
A certificate program.
Well, she could get involved, and she's already working at a company doing things. Well, she's in her early 20s.
Yeah.
And I think that it's like, okay, that's really useful stuff, but that doesn't get picked up in the same way. And I feel like a lot of people are very dissatisfied with what they got out of their education, how much they paid for it, and that they feel like their lives are being held up to it, which mixed with the most important thing of concern for Michigan voters, which is the last point, which is they feel like inflation is really biting them really hard, whether it's groceries or, from what listeners have said, housing costs.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Because first of all, to your point about the young woman you just mentioned, is that coding is a trade at this point. Like, we need to treat it like a trade. Some people, there are a lot of coding certificate programs where you can go and learn coding languages that don't necessarily need a 4-year degree. Let's just treat it like a trade. I think it should be subsidized in certain schools. I think you should be able to go to, Henry Ford Community College and get a certificate for it and be able to move on with your life and be able to start working, at 18, 19 years old, because that's what's needed. And the thing for me, as somebody who did the whole university thing, is that the schism for me, and what we need to really hone in on and focus in on, is there's value in the university and value in college beyond your degree. And I think a lot of people have not necessarily extracted those positives from college. That's just my personal opinion.
I think it depends on the college. So if you go to a U of M or a higher thing, it's that network that you can just, hit up somebody.
I went to Wayne State. I went to Wayne
But
State.
there's a strong network with that.
There's a strong network. But you
have to unlock it yourself.
You do. You have to unlock it. You have to have the willingness to be able to network with people. Every university has this, especially if you go to certain junior colleges. Every school has this because every school has people. So you're able to network. You're able to have access to things that the rest of the people who didn't go to that school simply do not have. So I think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding from that point. The most value I ever got out of college was not a piece of paper. It was the access to the people. That was what forwarded me in my career, and that's what forwarded me to sort of think differently about my career path. Now, is it for everyone? No, it's not. And I think that is the big thing that us millennials were sold a bill of goods on, because we were told if you don't go to college, your life will suck. And for a lot of people that don't have degrees, they're feeling the weight of that. So I think we need to rethink higher education in general. But my last point, going to what you were saying about inflation and all that, is that that a lot of that, and I'm not going to mention anything about like the Fed, because I'm not qualified to talk about like federal and national finance or anything like that. But also at the same time, man, we gotta lay something at the feet of CEOs and job creators and all the rest of the stuff to pay their people fairly. Because if we're seeing the price of everything go up, but we're not seeing wages go up, that's why the UAW results don't jive for me. How can you say that people fighting for a fair wage is not going to be viewed favorably? What? Because you're going to have to pay an extra $200 on your Ford Escape? That's dumb to me. Like, if the buck was directly passed to the consumer in order to guarantee that people were paid fair wages and living wages and could keep up with the cost of living, I would gladly pay that extra money. But instead, what I'm seeing is CEO pay go up by 300%. I'm seeing them take bonuses at the end of the year that are grossly inflated. And I'm not seeing any reconciliation for that in any industry. Name me an industry where CEO pays have stagnated, but the general worker pay has gone up. It don't exist. It don't exist in America. So for all the talk about inflation and all the talk about how rough it is for people, I'm not going to say that the Fed and all the rest of that stuff doesn't have a major part in it, but at the same time, if wages aren't keeping up with the cost of living, that falls on corporations, job creators, and the people who are signing the checks. I refuse to put this on just the federal government.
You know, Norris, we're gonna roll out something here.
Okay.
New segment. Tell me something good.
Oh, yay. I like good news, believe it or not.
This Saturday, December 16th, there will be a holiday market at the Fisher Building. Our friends at TechTown are actually partnering on this one. They're going to have pop-up vendors, graduates of the Retail Bootcamp program. There's a number of programs here that I have not told you about that are going to go into a special episode. Then you've got all the permanent vendors in the Fisher Building that you don't want to miss. It's a thing to check out, go do on Saturday. It's going to run from 12 to 5 p.m. So it's a good way to spend your afternoon and enjoy Detroit's largest art object. There's just so many places. Mature, we actually had on the show. They're based in there. So go do it. I'm telling you something good. Saturday, December 16th at the Holiday Market in the Fisher Building. All right, with that, we are done for today. Norris Howard, there's always so much more we could talk about, but we've been told that we're not supposed to do 2-hour episodes.
That's y'all loss. That's y'all loss, man.
Feedback, as always, dailydetroit@gmail.com or 313-789-3211. With that, I'm Jer Staves.
And I'm Norris Howard.
Remember that you are somebody, and we'll talk tomorrow.